Let me say that again. Ever feel like that? Sometimes I feel like that very noise and sound is a great example of how I feel as a parent. Can you relate to that? It seems like discouragement is around every corner. Disappointment and frustration. It's just a part of parenting. It's amazing how something that can bring you so much joy and so much fulfillment and happiness in one moment can completely discourage you and disappoint you and tear you down the very next moment. So today, I want to talk about dealing with discouragement as a parent. Maybe it comes in the form of something that you said or did that was wrong, that you're ashamed of, that you're disappointed even in yourself, and that brings discouragement. Maybe it's something that your kids did or said that you can't believe, that frustrates you, that discourages you, that disheartens you so much, and that leads to discouragement. Maybe you're not where you thought you should be or where you wanted to be in your life or for your kids' life. Maybe you said something recently that you totally regret. As soon as it left your mouth, you wish you could just grab it and pull it back in. But now the damage is done and feelings are hurt and tears are being shed and you feel like a failure. Trust me, I know exactly how that feels. So what do you do as a parent to stay encouraged? How can you stay positive? How can you avoid discouragement that seems to creep around every corner of your life and in your marriage and in your family and in your journey of parenting? That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how to stay encouraged by really reverse engineering that question. And instead of asking, how do you stay encouraged as a parent, let's answer the question, what discourages you as a parent? And let's try to avoid those things, come up with the reverse of those things, and maybe it changes. So if you've ever been discouraged as a parent, let me rephrase that. If you've been a parent more than 5 minutes, you know what it feels like to face disappointment and discouragement. And so let's talk about it. If you're looking for a story on parenting that is filled with disappointment and hardship, look no further than the story of Hannah. Hannah begins in 1 Samuel chapter 1 with a lady named Hannah that was unable to have a child. See, her parenting woes started even before she became a parent. Scripture tells us in verse 2 of 1 Samuel 1 that Elkanah had 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Now, there would be an extreme amount of emotion in those last 2 phrases. One of the wives had children, and one mother wished to be mother, hoped to be mother, prayed to be mother one day, could not. In this culture, a woman's identity and worth was determined by her ability to have children, specifically male children. So much so that a husband could marry multiple women and even divorce women and wives that he had if they showed an inability to produce a male to carry on the family name. And in this situation, Hannah was that woman. And what was even worse than her not being able to have kids was that, again, it's weird in this culture, but her husband's other wife was able to have kids. Plenty of kids. Never had a problem having kids. And as I think about discouragement in parenting and the discouragements that I face in my life, I realize that it starts in one common area. It starts in my life in this area. I believe it probably starts in your life in this area, and it also started in Hannah's life in this area. And here's the road. Journey with me. The first point is this. Here's what leads to discouragement. Number 1 is comparison. You ever compare yourself to other moms and dads, to other families, to other parents? You ever compare your kids to other kids? How smart they are, or how athletic they are, or the talents and the gifts that they have, the ability to showcase those talents on social media? How about you? The house that you have, the car that you drive, the job that you have, the finances that you have, the perfectly put together life that so many other people seem to have that you lack. So many times in parenting, we begin to compare ourselves as parents to other parents, and we compare our kids to other kids. And Hannah was living in this cycle where she was constantly in a state of comparison because there was this other woman in their family. Interestingly enough, that comparison was a battleground on who could be the best mom, or in Hannah's case, who could be a mom and who couldn't be a mom, who could have kids and have worth and be a contributor and who couldn't. So Hannah was constantly comparing herself to this other woman, and Peninnah didn't make it any easier on her. She magnified the comparison. Peninnah, it says in verse 6, would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask. Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? Can you believe that guy just said that? This girl is pouring her heart out, and her husband says, hey, chin up, babe. At least you got me. You know what comparison leads to? Leads to discontentment. You ever struggle with that as a parent? Here's the reason why comparison always leads to discontentment. Because we always compare ourselves to parents that have more than us, that have it better than us, that look more put together than us. We always compare our kids to kids that are smarter and faster and better dressed and seem to be better at everything else than our kids. More mature, more advanced, don't make the same mistakes, don't have the same problems. And because we always compare to people that are better or above us, it will always lead you to a place of discontentment. Here's Hannah. Her husband's like, don't be discontent. At least you have me. But Hannah, comparing herself to Peninnah, not having what she had, led her to a place of discontentment. She wanted what Peninnah had so badly that it was making her miserable. In fact, Scripture says it brought her to tears just thinking about it. And she couldn't handle it. It frustrated her so much. Hannah goes on to explain how much it hurt her and how much it led to discouragement, overwhelming discouragement. In verse 10, it says, Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, O Lord of heaven's armies, if you look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire life, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. There was a priest in the room that heard her crying out, heard her doing these ugly tears and mumbling these words, and he didn't know what to think. Scripture says, I don't know if she was drunk. I don't know if she just partied too much the night before. She was hung over and you couldn't hear her. But listen to Hannah and how discouraged she was. When being accused of being a drunkard and being too much of a party animal, and that's why you're crying and your nose is running and you're mumbling these words, she said, Oh no, sir. She replied, I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged. Ever been there? I'm very discouraged as I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of a great anguish and sorrow. All parents struggle with comparison. Comparison always leads to discontentment. I don't like my life. I don't like my job. I don't like my house. I don't like my paycheck. I don't like my spouse. I don't like my kids. I wish I could trade them in for something better. And that discontentment always leads to discouragement. She had to admit, I am very discouraged. I'm very heartbroken. I'm in anguish. I'm crying tears. I've been praying for things for a long time. Can you relate? There's just something about Hannah's situation that I think every parent can connect with. I know I do. So how do we get over it? How do we fight and battle discouragement? Hannah actually shows us how to turn it around. The priest, Eli, told her when he realized what she was doing, that she was calling out to the Lord, showing faith in the Lord, that she was incredibly discouraged at what was going on in her life. Here's what he says in verse 17. In that case, Eli said, "Go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request that you have asked of him." "Oh, thank you, sir," she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. In the latter part of the chapter, we realize that Hannah becomes pregnant and has a son and names him Samuel. Did you catch how she flipped the script? Did you catch how her attitude changed? Let me give it to you. It's the same thing that you and I can choose. Initially, she chose comparison, to compare herself to Peninnah, this other woman that seemed to have so much more than she had. But this priest allowed her to see something with the help of God, that instead of comparing herself, she needed to gain the right perspective. That's the enemy of comparison, is perspective. Sometimes as parents in our marriage and our families and with our kids, instead of comparing ourselves to other people, we just have to take a step back and have some right perspective. You have to take a step back and understand how blessed you are instead of focusing on what you don't have. You can look around and see people and families and kids that are much further behind you, that struggle a lot more than you, that are dealing with pains that you don't know anything about. And with the right perspective, what God can do is, instead of comparing yourself to others, which leads to discouragement and discontentment, if you have the right perspective, it'll actually lead to gratitude. Yeah, your kids aren't perfect, but they got a lot of good things going for them. Yeah, your marriage isn't the best marriage ever, but God's been really gracious to you. Yeah, sure, things in your life could go smoother and there could be less bumps and you could have more. But would you just take a minute and look around at what you do have and how much God has already blessed you with? The incredible opportunities that you have and the blessings that you have right in front of you. See, if you change your perspective, it'll lead to gratitude. That's exactly what happened to Hannah. Eli helped to change her perspective, change her viewpoint and her focus, which changed her response to, "Oh, thank you, sir." Then she went back and began to eat, and she was no longer sad. She replaced her sadness and discontentment with gratitude, all because her perspective shift. And that led to encouragement. You can read the rest of 1 Samuel 1 and realize how encouraged Hannah was, not only to have Samuel, but to honor her promise and give him to the Lord. So I want you to try to talk about that in your group today. Talk about the road to discouragement and the discouragements you face as a parent. I'd be willing to bet that it starts with a comparison trap and it leads to discontentment and leaves you discouraged. Why not try this? Why not ask God for a new perspective on your family, on your marriage, on your life, on your finances? And I'd be willing to bet that a change in perspective will allow you to be grateful, to actually see the blessings that God has given you. And that gratitude will keep you encouraged. Yeah, life's not perfect. Yeah, it can get better, and we're going to continue to pray and ask God for big things in the lives of our children and in our life and our marriage and our finances and our job and everything. But right now, I can be encouraged. With the right perspective and a large helping of gratitude for all that God has done for you. Let's answer a few questions in the group today so that we can figure out how to avoid discouragement and stay encouraged as parents.